SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Grammy Museum, Mississippi invites you to visit the Music America, iconic objects from America's music history, supported by Visit Mississippi and the Mississippi Humanities Council. Go to GrammyMuseumMS.org to learn more.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C Spire. Power your home or business with C Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C Spire. C Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midday SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy.
All righty. Yesterday was a bloody day, as they say on Wall Street, but the carnage is not over. The Dow now down 525. The NASDAQ, it was up earlier, and it, too, has retreated, now negative. And this is because of, again, the uncertainty around tariffs, what the federal government is going to do with respect to the Trump tax cuts. And, of course, we run out of money again on Friday. But don't be distressed over that, my young friend, because the House has done what it's done. Let's see. I can't even count the number of times sequentially. The same action. Passed another dreaded continuing of resolution, so-called CR. All that means, folks, is we're just going to keep things just like they are. Don't worry. Government's going to stay open. And in this case, the president fully endorses this through the end of the fiscal year. That's September 30th. Now, I checked out the latest Treasury report through the month of January. Actually, it's now out through the month of February. Yep, that's right. Got that last night. So that's 5 months. Through the first 5 months of the year, well, the deficit, a stunning $1.1 trillion. Yes, that's with a T as in Tom, trillion. Is it getting harder to comprehend what a trillion is, or have we become desensitized to it? Oh, trillion, okay. It feels like it, doesn't it? I find myself often conflating trillion and billion because here in the state, our dollars are generally expressed in billions. When you look at our state revenue, our state spending, but up there in Washington, oh no, it's trillions. And we just toss that word around like it's pennies. Oh, it's 1.1 trillion. Unbelievable. So for those of you keeping score, if you extrapolate and annualize that, that works out to be about 2.6 trillion for the fiscal year. That is the trajectory, a favorite word on Wall Street, by the way, Rhino. That and synergy. Oh, boy, that would float their boat anytime you say, oh, but the synergy. In this case, the trajectory ain't looking good. 2.6 trillion. That's where we're headed. Man, that's hard to comprehend. Hopefully, we can return to regular order there, Mr. Speaker. Mike Johnson, who I think is doing a great job, by the way.
I would say not such a great job if you can't get regular order done at this point.
He can't get his caucus to coalesce around that. They just won't do it.
If you can't get it done now, what makes you think it'll get done in September?
Well, that's a good point. You've already seen Thomas Massie say he's a nay, and he went to social media. He had an interesting little post that said, wait, you told us in 23 we had to do it because of this. You told us in 24 we had to do it because of this. Then you told us again in the second half of 24 we had to do it because of this. Here we are again. He's right. You can't deny that. You absolutely can't deny that. It seems like we're stuck in continuing resolution land rather than putting 12 bills out for the members of the chamber to debate and amend and discuss.
I mean, in fairness, that's happened,
Not
5 times
not
since
often.
Jimmy Carter was in office?
It's become a rarity. It really has. It has become the exception. It should be that the CR, that was designed to be an exception, like an emergency, aberrational situation. But it's become more...
Well, career politicians were supposed to be the exception.
Well, that's true. So that's where we are, and then the markets today are still squeamish because of the lack of clarity on tax cuts and tariffs. On the C-Spire text line, Chris from Oxford says, our great president just hit Canada back on the electricity issue that about 30 minutes ago. That's true. Sure did. What he's talking about there is Canada's announcement, I believe it's Ontario, would impose a 25% surcharge on electricity that it delivers to residents of New York, Minnesota, and Michigan. And so that, of course, will increase the cost to Americans in those states which rely on the energy produced by Ontario. The problem, of course, is you can't just throw up a power plant in a week or two and replace that electricity. That's a multi-year project. So today, I don't think just as yet, Chris, he formally has imposed tariffs, but he has announced a sharp escalation, if you will, in this trade war with Canada in retaliation for this electricity. Here's what he said. Based on Ontario, Canada placing a 25% tariff on electricity, and he has that in quotes, coming into the United States, I have instructed my Secretary of Commerce to add an additional 25% tariff to 50% on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States from Canada. That's in all caps. One of the highest tariffing nations anywhere in the world in all caps. That was in a social media post, but I've not seen any evidence that that's official. But it looks like it is imminent, as Chris says here. He also said he would declare a national electricity emergency in the states in which states where Ontario does supply electricity. He threatened to substantially, in quotes, increase tariffs on cars coming into the United States. This just feels like a game of chicken. Who's going to bend here? How long will these tariffs, these elevated tariffs, endure? When do people start complaining? I think that's already happening in the background more than we know. And in fact, we've got Leah Long with the National Federation of Independent Small Business for Mississippi and Louisiana. She is the director for those two states. With us at 10:35, Henry Barbour at 11:05. But I'm curious to see what Leah has to say about members in the small business community in terms of their reaction to these tariffs. Now, here's the deal. If we win this war, and it is a war, let's be honest, and it's intentional. If we win this war, Mr. Trump is absolutely right. We will benefit from it. But if it is another Vietnam, using the comparison somewhat metaphorically, that could endure for years. And my fear, just to be perfectly honest, is that people are very short-term in their thinking. We in America don't think like the Chinese with a 100-year plan. We think like about a day plan, 2-day plan. We're short-term oriented people. That's just a function of our culture. It's not a bad thing. It's just an observation. And if this continues and we don't see any relief in pricing or stability in pricing, it could have ramifications in the midterms. Here's the salvation, though, Rhino. This is the primary savior for the Republican Party in that respect when it comes to the midterms, which are a year and 8 months out. Hard to believe we have to go back and do that all over again. We got a break right now. I'll continue my thoughts on this on the other side of this break. The Dow now down 397. The NASDAQ has crossed the unchanged line. The old kangaroo hopping around, as Rhino likes to say. It's in green territory slightly. Oil up today as well. Gold up a bit. Your favorite funny money, man, it's volatile, isn't it? It is extremely volatile. We're in the Element Wealth studio just getting started on this Tuesday, and it's a gorgeous one in Mississippi. Stay with us.
Electric Avenue. Electric Avenue.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
We're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
Awesome. On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio. So just continuing the discussion about what the salvation, I believe, will be for the Republicans, even if we continue the economic tumult, which I think is going to persist for a while. It could be part of this disturbance, as the president mentioned in his speech to the joint session of Congress last week, and then in his interview with Fox Business's Maria Bartiromo. Fantastic interview, by the way, where he was asked a question directly by Maria about the prospect of a recession, and he refused to rule it out. But here's what's kind of confusing, Rhino. Earlier in the day, his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, I like Howard because he's just full of energy and optimism. I love it, man. He was on over there on NBC, Meet the Press. What did Rush used to call it? Meet the Depressed. And he said, recession, oh, perish those thoughts. That ain't going to happen. So he says, no, there's no chance, no way. And the president said, well, I'm not ruling it out. So I'm not sure where that stands. But here's what could be the saving grace for Republicans. They're just leaning so hard into this social justice garbage and social issues. They refuse to disassociate, to repudiate, as evidenced by every dang one of them in the U.S. Senate voting against legislation that would have prohibited
dudes in dresses
playing against girls in sports. I mean, you know that every Republican running for office in 2026, be it House or Senate, are going to highlight that in their campaign materials, and they should. And when Hakeem Jeffries, didn't we play that clip yesterday, I think, or did we? You may have it. I can't remember. If you do, let's tee it up. It's real short. He was asked directly the question by a reporter about that. Now, who's Hakeem Jeffries? He's the minority.
Yeah, we played that Friday.
Okay. The minority leader. It may be worth queuing up again here, Rhino.
I want to ask about California Governor Gavin Newsom's comments saying that Democrats were in the wrong for allowing transgender athletes to compete in female and girls sports. What is your response to that after Democrats had opposed the women and girls in sports?
I haven't seen his comments. What Democrats opposed was unleashing sexual predators on girls throughout the United States of America.
No, you voted for exactly that, you fool. Oh my gosh. This is going to be the saving grace. I'd be playing that clip if I were running. This is what the leader in the U.S. House of Representatives on the Democrat side believes. I totally do think this could be a very powerful strategic talking point in the midterms. There's no doubt about it. Just incredible that this sort of stuff is going on. So you guys keep leaning into that, because even though people may say, I'm not happy about the economy, really haven't seen any benefits, possibly, it's still a little early to tell with respect to the reaction in the economy from Mr. Trump's policies at this point. It's causing pain right now, and he even said it. He warned us. He told us. I think it was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent who said we've got to go through a period of detoxification in making this transition. But the Democrats, in their display last week, with their little pink outfits and their stupid little signs, and now Hakeem Jeffries, and then you saw them all assemble in the House singing the We Shall Overcome. I'm here to tell you, the Reverend Martin Luther King is embarrassed at how you behave, at your comportment, at your policy positions. I do not think, Rhino, for 1 minute, Martin Luther King would support that sort of nonsense. I just don't. I think he is more where we are. When you're an adult, live and let live. Leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. But you start messing with kids, and that's really what this sporting deal is about. We're talking about youngsters, even in college. I'm going to call them youngsters. If we refer to them, now I know people in college, they're referred to as men and women, not boys and girls. That's fine. Of course, heck, I don't know anymore what to refer to anybody to appease the left standards. But nonetheless.
Here's the secret.
What?
Stop trying to appease them.
That's a good point.
Because nothing's ever going to be good enough. If they're going to be offended by anything, just go ahead and offend them with the truth.
And let me be clear. I'm not trying to appease them, and I don't give a rip what they think. I want to be clear about that. I'm not succumbing to your stupid pronoun crap and all that junk. That's just dumb. You guys keep leaning into that, though. You promote that, assuming that is a high top priority to Americans. You're totally wrong on this. You're on the wrong side of this, and you haven't woken up, and I hope you stay asleep. Crazy. On the ceasefire text line, talking about Ontario producing electricity for several northern states. They shouldn't have been relying on another country for power to start with. That's crazy. Yeah, what do you think we do? You think that we don't have to import oil to satisfy our needs to the tune of 7 million barrels a day? We produce about 13 million, which is the most in our history, and we consume just under 20 million. Not only that, we don't have the refining capacity, even if we did step up production. We still have to send it overseas for refining. And I want to see the world be more engaged in free, fair trade. It's good for all of us. And by the way, think about this, guys. The farmers right here in Mississippi, you know who they rely on for their well-being, the viability of their businesses? To a great extent, other countries, China, Canada, where they export their goods. So if China and Canada took the same posture, we don't want to rely on America for those foods, our farmers would have to pack it in and call it a day. The good news is they produce more than we can consume in the United States. That's a great thing. That's a function of automation and technology and innovation in farming methods and techniques. The development of farming products that enhance yields and help to eradicate invasive species and all the stuff that's involved in farming. It's a bit over my head, I'll admit, but I am at least cognizant enough to understand that we've had massive improvements in techniques and in materials and products that allow our farmers to produce at unbelievable yields. I'm reminded of my old econ professor back in the 70s who explained something I didn't know until I was in his class. He said, in the 30s, a third of our population, which was about 140 million people back then, were involved in the agricultural industry, and we barely could feed ourselves. Now it's about 3%. We have 3 times as many people nearly, and we feed the dang world. We produce way more than we could eat here, which is a great thing. It's positive, but we do it with a lot fewer people because of mechanization and automation and innovation, human innovation. It's fantastic. It's a great deal. Speaking of which, talking about food, how about RFK and Sean Hannity eating at the Steak and Shake?
With the milkshake. I didn't order that.
They didn't want that sweet dairy product, did they? Man, Steak and Shake shakes are pretty good, though. Yeah. They're killer, I'd have to say. But
I'm not dogging their burgers and fries, but
yeah, that's
kind of what you go there for, is their shake.
Which I've always thought is a recipe for a very profitable model, because in a lot of restaurants you're probably
dessert's like purely markup.
Yeah, exactly. But when you go to a place like that, you're going to have the dessert for the most part. People are going to have the burgers and the fries and the dessert because that's their specialty. So that's in their name. But they're there to highlight the company's conversion to, what's it called?
Beef tallow.
Beef tallow, right, as opposed to vegetable oil. And that's better for you. It's supposed to be healthier for you. And
it was common practice until the 90s.
Right.
Everywhere.
Right. And as I recall...
Because think about it. You're cooking burgers. You get the fat rendered off the beef from the burgers. You use the fat in the fryer. Cost savings.
Right. I remember that being touted, though, Rhino, when it was first introduced as better for you. Remember that? But I think we've learned a lot since then, and so now we're converting back, which sounds like a good thing. Wow. So we've got Leah Long, National Federation of Independent Small Business, coming up next, once again at 11:05. It's GOP Strategist Henry Barbour. Stay with us. We're in the Element Wealth Studio.
It's time for Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass stands a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along. Come inside. The show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. Rest assured, don't get your money's worth. Greatest show. It happened how right. You gotta see the show. It's about to move. You gotta see the show.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth Studio. So appreciative of you joining us today. We've got Leah Long. She is the Mississippi and Louisiana Director for the National Federation of Independent Small Business. Leah, always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, we have seen the tariff policy imposed by the president really wreak havoc on the markets, which, of course, primarily applies to publicly traded companies. I suspect that the majority of your members are not publicly traded, but this affects the overall economy, and I suspect it affects many of your members as well. What are they telling you?
Yeah, the tariff issue is super concerning, but actually from our members, the biggest issue that we're hearing is, the 20% small business deduction.
Yeah.
Which I know we've talked about that several times on the show. And so they've kind of talked about the tariffs, but the biggest thing is that, 9 out of 10 businesses, if this is not, reinstated and made permanent, will be hit with a massive tax hike this year. So right now, that's kind of their biggest issue with Congress. And, we've been working hard to get them to permanently reinstate that. So that's kind of where they are on federal issues. Everything's a little concerning right now, but that's their biggest concern.
Yeah, I completely understand it. Besides the 20% pass-through deduction there, just the overall tax rates, tax treatment, all the above it would, if not renewed, cause their taxes to go up. It would hit hard, especially small and mid-sized pass-through S-Corp, LLC-type structured organizations. Mm-hmm. I really wish the president would have focused on that and waited until that was passed and then tackled the tariff issue. I'm with him in that, as he likes to say, we've been ripped off. I agree. And I think we need some sort of action to do away with this disparity, to eradicate the disparity between this country and other countries and our cross trading. But man, I sure do wish we could focus on those tax cuts, because I don't know if you're hearing this from your members, Leah, and I'll ask you to respond on that. Are they kind of in a wait-and-see posture, maybe thinking about making some investments, expansion, hiring, et cetera, but without the clarity on future tax policy, they're just have a tendency to lock up and really freeze?
Yeah, so, we kind of do the small business kind of to talk about everything that happens every month. And so for us, it has fell. December was a higher month for us with optimism, but it has fell because the uncertainty of the economic future is bothering these small business owners. Not only they're still dealing with inflation, but just like you're saying, tax policy, just the cost of doing business is higher. You think about the labor shortages and labor cost issue. And so, they're a little uncertain right now. And, we were hoping that it would be more positive and, they were optimistic about investing into their businesses and expanding. But right now with the future, you just don't know. And so I think they're kind of pulling back a little bit about how positive they were to see their business grow. And that's very upsetting because we came into 2025 with really high hopes for small business owners.
In Mississippi, as you know, and the same is true in Louisiana, we have a fairly significant agricultural industry. I'm sure some of those are your members. Many of these are small businesses, right? And tariffs really do have an impact on them, mainly because they export much of their produce and their yield to other countries where these tariffs are taking effect. And the other countries are responding to Mr. Trump's tariffs, and they're raising them. So this could have an effect, right?
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about just farmers in Mississippi. I know we're kind of big at the Capitol right now. They need a lot of relief. They were hit with property tax issues, sales tax issues. And so that's kind of been a lot of the things we've been watching this session is because there's some relief that needs, especially for these poultry farmers. I know the Poultry Association kind of puts out information all the time, but I know there's several bills that have been sent to Governor Reeves' desk. And so we're hoping he'll sign them to give the much needed relief for the farmers. Because if they are dealing with the tariffs and now they're dealing with property taxes, it's going to be hard for them to make it.
Yeah.
We desperately need it,
Yeah. Now, so as I recall, Leah, during Mr. Trump's first term, after he imposed tariffs on China, which is a buyer of much of our agricultural export, that it did have a negative effect on their business and their revenue. And as I recall, Mr. Trump sent out significant multi-billions of dollars of subsidies to help offset those losses. Is that being discussed again? Are you hearing anything about that?
I mean, it's obviously being discussed, but, for our members, it's just kind of every day, how to keep their business going. And so, we focus on what can be done right now at the state level or federal level. And so that's kind of how they are. Their biggest issue, like I said, was taxes, and especially the farmers, too. I know we've heard in Mississippi tons of property tax issues. And they're also having issues finding labor. And that's a big thing. And so right now, that is their everyday, issue that they come in every morning figuring out how to do.
So you mentioned property taxes a couple of times. Leah, is that specific to Mississippi, Louisiana, both? What's going on there?
Mississippi, for the poultry farmers, I know it was a big issue. They were hit with an increase in property taxes, and so that's something they've had to deal with. And I know there's several bills, I think, in both chambers of the Mississippi legislature right now, and I know they face the March 18th deadline. So if you are a poultry farmer and you're listening, please contact your legislator to get them to support these bills to help you. But those are big issues, and sales tax issues for the equipment that they do use, and so trying to give them relief so they can continue to operate, because without the poultry farmers, I'm not quite sure where we're going to be.
Huge part of Mississippi's economy, no doubt about it. So is the problem there, Leah, the reassessment of the value of their real property assets, which has increased the property tax liability, or has there been an increase in millage in some of these counties?
I could be a little bit of both. I think some of the millages, but it was an increase in the property assessment, and I think that hasn't changed in several years from what I was understanding. And all of a sudden they changed it, and these poultry farmers were not prepared for that. And thinking about the economy and inflation, how it's been the last several years, the reserve money they may have had available may not be there anymore to pay these taxes. So something for them to think about, and make it more fair for them.
Okay, what about taxes here in Mississippi? You're well aware that we've got competing legislation. The House was out of the gate early with HB 1, which would totally eliminate the income tax over a period of time, raise the sales tax, the general sales tax, lower the grocery sales tax, also impose a new sales tax on fuel. Senate has a different take on that. They stopped short of full elimination. Do you guys have a position on this, Leah?
So right now, the devil's in the details for us. We always support lowering the personal income tax rate. Most of our members file that way, so it's more beneficial for them. But, we've kind of always historically not supported a gas tax increase. And so we're trying to watch and see where this plays out. It's kind of at a standstill. You go into the Capitol and it's kind of quiet to figure out, okay, well, when is the Senate going to come back, and when are we going to have a plan? We're about a month away from the end. So, I think for us, we're continuing to watch, and we're keeping our members involved and making sure they know as things progress. But we would love to see the personal income tax rate go down. We got to stay competitive in the South. Me doing Louisiana too. We just went through that. So I know Mississippi and Louisiana compete every year to, who's the better state. So a lot of industry specific things come to both states, and I think it'll help if the personal income tax rate is lower.
Now, Louisiana just did that, did they not, Leah? Didn't they pass some legislation?
They did.
Okay.
They did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They did in November, so they lowered theirs, and so I think for Mississippi to stay competitive with Louisiana, they've got to continue to lower theirs also.
I think it's kind of good to see the neighboring states here in the Deep South sort of trading barbs on hold my beer, who can lower the income tax the most. I like to see that. That's great.
It's great. I live close to the Mississippi state line, so you always hear people moving back and forth depending on how industry's doing in each state. So I think it kind of keeps it good for the states to kind of go back and forth. But there's also another bill I kind of want to mention on the state side is House Bill 302. It's basically gives credit, a grant to students and people going to trade schools and community colleges to get industry-specific certificates. And so, we always talk about workforce development in Mississippi and making, a stronger workforce. And so that's definitely something I urge the Senate to pass. It has passed the House. And so we do need a larger skill set of workforce so that we can finish and, complete some of these labor shortage issues and make sure that we have qualified workers.
Okay. Before we go real quick, got about 10 or 20 seconds. You guys have any position on mobile sports betting in Mississippi?
We do not. We do not.
Okay. Fair
enough.
enough.
Position on that.
Understand. Well, appreciate.
I do love that though. Personally, I love that.
I'm with you.
We don't. NFIB does not have a position on that.
Fair enough. Appreciate it, Leah. Leah Long, National Federation of Independent Small Business, the director for Mississippi and Louisiana. We'll talk to you again soon, Leah. Thanks a lot. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Come
Come on.
Middays with Gerard Gibert
All right, we are back.
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
The great David Bowie. Welcome back, everyone. Let's see. On the 662, we read the text in the last segment, or the segment before we conducted our interview with Leah Long from the NFIB about why these states in the northern part of the country are relying on electricity from Ontario. And the simple answer is cost. It's just that. It's cheaper to produce and transmit electricity from Ontario just based on geographic considerations to the residents in those states than it is to do the same inside the country. And I don't think it makes sense for us to just become total isolationists so that we only produce and consume inside our borders, that everything we produce is just for consumption inside the borders, and everything we consume all comes from inside our borders. Global trade is in our best interest. It's in the world's best interest. What we didn't anticipate when this was done, and by the way, I'm going to read you a social media post just a few minutes ago. While we were conducting our interview with Leah from the president, he says, why would our country allow another country to supply us with electricity, even for a small area? Who made these decisions and why? And can you imagine Canada stooping so low as to use electricity that so affects the life of innocent people as a bargaining chip and threat? I hear him, and I guess that I haven't done the research on this, but I can't believe it would be for any other reasons, Rhino, than just the efficiency and the cost associated with delivering electricity to those small areas. No, we're not talking about the whole states, by the way. We're just talking about small regions within those states. Look, this is a trade war. What'd you say the other day? All is fair in love and war, right? This is a trade war. And I appreciate the president saying, why would they stoop so low to do that? Of course, they would say the same thing about tariffs we're putting on American manufacturers of automobiles who make their cars in Canada and ship them into the United States, that the tariffs we have imposed on those imports are having an effect on the livelihoods of the people. I'm just basically saying this is a trade war. And these are the consequences of a trade war. I'm certainly not competing with or being confrontational or criticizing what the president's saying here whatsoever. He's absolutely right that when you rely on other countries, you've always got risk, just like we do here. We rely heavily on other countries to consume our goods and services. There's risk associated with that. Just ask the Mississippi's farmers. They rely heavily on consumption of their goods by other countries, import of their goods by other countries, including China. Like I said, the good news is we produce excess of what we need here in this country, and that allows them to capitalize on a global market. Many of our strongest, most successful corporations obviously rely on a global market. How many people are in the world now, Rhino? 8 billion? What we got here? 330 million? We're not that much. Citizens, that's right. We got who knows how many illegals running around the country. But the good news is all this technology, all this supply chain development that's occurred for decades has enabled this massive amount of global trade and exchange. Unfortunately, some countries seek to punish this country and impose these crazy tariffs on us as a protectionist move to protect their own businesses that produce the same products. What I'd like to see is zero tariffs on both sides. I think that would be a massive boost to global economic prosperity. But right now, the president's plan is to impose these tariffs to get these other countries to reduce theirs. Simple as that. He just wants a level and fair playing field, and I certainly support that. You guys have seen all the reports about the crazy tariffs charged by Canada and Mexico, and if you want to know why, just as the president is asking this question, why in the world are we consuming electricity from Ontario? And I just shared that for cost purposes, that's the same exact reason why GM and other manufacturers, I'm just picking on them because they have massive operations, manufacturing operations in our bordering nations, Mexico and Canada. And the answer is cost. Didn't you look up for us yesterday, like what the average worker in these factories is making?
In Mexico, an auto worker in a factory makes between, depending on the job, $9 and $35 a day.
A day. So I haven't looked at it, but I'm going to guess the average union worker in an American-based, domestically based auto factory.
More than that an hour.
Right. About $40 an hour, I bet, when you look it up. Plus egregious benefits. I mean, gold-plated benefits that Congress would give anything for. We're coming right back with Henry Barbour after Fox News and SuperTalk News. Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. J. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. It's our pleasure to welcome Henry Barbour. He's a GOP strategist. Henry, thanks for coming in. Good to see you, man.
Gerard, it's a pleasure. Glad to be with you.
You bet. Can you remember in your rather extensive analysis and observation of presidential terms, so much activity in such a short period of time?
No.
That was an easy one, wasn't it?
That's an easy one. Okay, am I done? Trump is a different guy. And he sees, having lost that second term to Biden, he sees his opportunity. And he knows that Republicans got the Senate, we got the House. This is his window for sure, this sort of 2-year period. And, man, they've got their foot on the gas. I mean, they're doing more things than the press can keep up with. The Democrats can't keep up with it. Republicans can't keep up with it. It's pretty amazing. The things he's trying to accomplish, I will say. And Wall Street was very fired up about it a couple months ago. And just the thought of, okay, we're getting back to kind of capitalism and competition, freedom, the kinds of things that we're expecting. But I'm afraid we have given too much uncertainty. And if there's one thing the market loathes, it's uncertainty.
No doubt.
And I think, we were just saying, the markets would welcome a coherent, steady plan on tariffs. Tell us what you're going to do, and so we can plan for it. But that's what's going on in the markets right now is just this great uncertainty.
No doubt.
Know. How can you plan? How do you know what your costs are going to be? What markets can you be in? And so we've got some serious risk right now. I mean, Trump acknowledged that over the weekend. Even though Lutnick, it's funny, Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, he said, no chance of recession. So they weren't necessarily on the same page, but we know there's one voice for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now, and that's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So interesting times, but I think we're at a bit of a crossroads. But Trump is determined that we've been getting ripped off with trade, and Trump, he don't like getting ripped off.
No, he doesn't. He's a consummate deal maker, and he thinks these are bad deals. I mean, that's the way he describes them, and so his approach to pushing back on those deals and negotiating better deals is to use his power as the president to impose these tariffs. And he told us there was going to be a disturbance, is the way he termed it. I think we're witnessing that right now, certainly in the markets, and the uncertainty that has a lot of business people. We just had Leah Long with the NFIB on, and her members are expressing the same thing. And what tends to happen with uncertainty, Henry, is businesses will just freeze up, lock up, pause, just delay any critical financial decisions or business decisions till they have that clarity, and that's what we're going through.
Just like a family.
Exactly right.
If you lose your job, if you're about to lose your job, or you're going to take a pay cut or whatever it is, it's the same thing.
That's exactly right.
It's real complicated.
That's totally right. Now, if we prevail, this could be fantastic. If the president is successful with his strategy and driving many of these countries to relax their tariffs on American goods, making our goods more affordable for them to import, man, we win big time on that. But if they stand pat and put a stake in the ground and we just have this stalemate for a while, that could cause pain, and it could affect us politically, couldn't it, Henry?
Well, 100%. There's a lot at risk, with the economy and politically. But Trump clearly is a believer on tariffs. I mean, this is not a new thing, and I think he is believing in it, but he also thinks, Gerard, that it's going to force investment in the U.S. We're going to bring jobs back to the U.S. We're going to bring manufacturing back, and I hope that's right for the long-term good of our economy. But we do have a lot of risk, and certainly Republicans have very, very thin margins. 218 to 214 in the House, 53-47 in the Senate. So very thin margins. And so, Bill Clinton was riding high when he got elected president, and then they lost 56 seats in the House in 1994. Now, nobody's going to lose 56 seats, but you could lose the majority, and that's the thing. Democrats have no control right now.
Right, zero.
They have, and they just are lost. And you could see at the State of the Union that they don't know what to do.
Exactly.
So there's great political risk.
Yeah.
But I hope Republicans and Democrats alike can pull for the country. That, okay, if this is what the president is the route we're going down, let's have it be successful.
Yeah.
That's for the good of 340 million Americans. We need that. And but I'm not real sure a lot of Democrats are pulling for that.
I agree.
Some may be. I mean, those that are out working hard, they want a good economy. They want less inflation. They want less regulation. They want more freedom. The kinds of things that Trump's talking about. But Trump has delivered too much uncertainty with the tariffs. I mean, we saw last week Canada, Mexico, back and forth. It's 25%. Well, no, it's not going to be. And, well, we're going to let Mexico off anyway. Because she's nice to me on the phone. And so it's been rough, Gerard.
It has. So today, I believe, Henry, the president is scheduled to meet with a group of business leaders, but no press, as I recall, are invited. And I suspect it's going to be a discussion about his current economic policies and the trajectory and the impact those have had.
Well, I'm all for the press. But there are a lot of meetings.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, don't need to be public.
Agree.
And, if you want to wave to the camera afterwards, or if, CEOs want to talk to the reporters out on the North Lawn at the White House, then that's great. Let them do that. But the president needs to be able to have free exchange with folks so they know it's just in that room. them talking so they can be candid. You can't do that with the with the cameras rolling. Even though it did happen with Zelensky.
That's true.
That was
unexpected.
Yeah. Well, I think both of them, Zelensky and Trump and Vance, all kind of walked into that meeting hot.
Completely agree. I completely agree. And I think we have to acknowledge that this president is perhaps the most engaging and interacting with the press maybe ever that we've had. You can't deny that.
Ever. Ever. I don't think there's no competition.
I agree.
It's not even close.
And he's good
loves
at
it.
And he's very direct. He doesn't beat around the bush. When he says something, it's very succinct. There's no wondering, what did he say there? So
it is. But what you do wonder about sometimes, he says things, but doesn't necessarily mean that's the policy. He likes to talk. He likes to talk about what's on his mind, and he likes to disrupt and try to make things happen and make people think. And whether it's foreign leaders, he sends a message, about the 51st state. He's always sending a message.
Yeah.
No president can compete. You think about any of them. I'd probably say Bill Clinton was the most comfortable talking.
I would agree
with reporters because he was so good on policy. In that he understood the depths of it, but he could speak the political language. So he would probably be the one that I would say would be closest, but not even in the same venue as Donald Trump.
Certainly a major pivot from the prior Biden administration, which it couldn't get anything out of him with the press. He just shied away from it totally.
It was kind of sad.
Yeah.
It was sad.
When we come back, Henry, I want to talk to you about this year's 3 Mississippi Top 50 Hall of Fame Award recipients. I believe you know all three of them.
Yeah,
so,
that'd be great.
We're going to come right back with Henry Barbour. Stay with us.
Get downright great deals from your down-home dealer.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite! On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're visiting with Henry Barbour, GOP Strategist. So, Henry, tonight, the top 50. Tomorrow. Pardon me. Tomorrow, Wednesday night, the Mississippi Top 50 recognition event takes place. And every year, they always induct some prior winners into the Hall of Fame. This year, let's talk about Jeannie Lucky. What a powerful voice, what an icon she was in the Republican Party in the state of Mississippi. I know you and Jeannie had a great relationship. Fantastic lady, very much missed. Tell us about that.
Jeannie Lucky, I really loved her as a friend. She and I served on the RNC together for 14 years, so we were kind of in the thick of it for a long time. And she really became a good buddy of mine, and we were allies on the committee. And but she had been the head of the president of the Mississippi Federation of Republican Women, and a great leader and much beloved. And of course, she had an accident after Katrina, just right after a car wreck, and changed her life. But the amazing thing about Jeannie, who spent all these hours, in a wheelchair, and quote handicap. I don't think she knew it. I mean,
didn't slow her down, did it?
Didn't slow her down. And Jeannie Lucky was so optimistic and positive, and you just never heard her complain. I don't think she knew what the word complain means. She just was always getting stuff done, and so she was beloved on the RNC. People had just great respect for her, almost reverence, because she worked so hard and big heart, love folks, but she was tough too on the committee.
Yeah,
and of course she served on IHL, the college board, and was a leader there, and was a leader in her community. She's from Ocean Springs on the coast, and her husband Alwyn Lucky, a successful attorney. They were a great team, 2 beautiful daughters and a couple of grandchildren. I went to her funeral, I guess 6, 8, I can't remember exactly. No, it was end of last year.
Yeah.
It was so powerful, what people had to say, particularly her daughters.
She touched a lot of people.
She touched
no doubt.
a lot of people.
No doubt. Yep.
She did.
She and Alwyn, just such prominent figures in the political world and in the party, not only in Mississippi, but nationally as well.
Yeah, and I tell you what, Alwyn Lucky, I observed this, being on the RNC and being around Jeannie so much. Alwyn was a mighty good husband.
Whoa, man.
Man, he, what Jeannie needed is what he cared about.
No doubt. That's totally true.
He was a loving husband.
No doubt. She will be greatly missed. Our own Paul Gallo being inducted. How perfect is that the top 50 would see fit to introduce him into the Hall of Fame?
Well, if you think about who are the 50 most influential people in the state as it relates particularly to politics, Paul Gallo, is maybe the first person on the list.
Yeah.
Every elected official, every operative wanted to come on the Gallo show. Now, they were a little afraid to come on sometimes because, Paul is not necessarily going to be an easy interview. He's going to ask you some hard questions. But everybody wanted to be on the Gallo show, and in some respects, if you worked in politics and you hadn't been on the Gallo show,
you hadn't made it.
You hadn't made it. You hadn't made it. So just an institution, and I will say, having been on the Gallo show a few times, it was always fun and entertaining, and you didn't quite know what to expect. You thought you were going to talk about this, but it went to whatever Paul was thinking about and whatever he thought the audience needed to hear about.
That's true.
Because he definitely had that perspective of what does the audience need to know?
No doubt.
And he held people accountable. You might dodge his question the first time, but the second or third time, you probably pretty much got an answer. And he did that, I think, on behalf of Mississippians. And I think Steve Davenport, the SuperTalk team, just, Paul is, we need a statue of Paul. Just what an institution.
Unbelievable. Great words there. Appreciate that, Henry. Archie Manning, man, is there no greater ambassador for the state of Mississippi than Archie Manning?
I don't know who it would be. Archie Manning, obviously a great athlete, but people don't. People love that, and they love the old videos of him with the broken arm running around, like he's 11 years old, just in the front yard, just incredible. But I think when people think of Archie Manning and Olivia Manning and their children,
sure,
they just think, what good people. Archie Manning has been a great son to Mississippi, but also New Orleans and Louisiana, and just so involved with hospitals, children's hospitals, with any kind of foundation that is trying to help people. And you see his sons doing the same. Now, I will say Eli and Peyton are kind of having too much fun on TV. I mean, it's pretty hysterical. But all of that is part of, I think, of what Archie has given us. And so I'm delighted that Archie Manning, as you say, maybe Mississippi's greatest ambassador, is getting recognized. And I'm glad he's been smart enough to stay out of politics.
Yeah, I agree. And you make a great point in how New Orleans in particular and the state of Louisiana, because of his tenure with the Saints, they've adopted him and the Manning family. I mean, he's a prominent figure in New Orleans, has been since he's been there, still is today. Oh, yeah. Honestly. But it's important that we continue to remind people he's a Mississippian. He's from the Delta of Mississippi.
True,
that's where his roots are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Olivia as well, from Neshoba County.
That's right.
We can't overlook that.
No, that's right. I've been in the Neshoba County Fair a fair amount of times over the years, and you'd see the Mannings. You'd see the boys there, 20, 25 years ago, because that's where their family was. Yeah. That's where they're from. Yeah. And so the Mannings are a big deal nationally. But I think those of us from Mississippi, we just see them as fellow Mississippians, even though it's a little bit of a stretch to call them, the boys anyway, Mississippians. But, of course, Eli went to Ole Miss, and people are still mad at Peyton.
They sure are.
But Eli would go in there. One of the local restaurants there in Oxford, and they had a lady, and she would take the orders, and Eli places his order, and the lady goes, "Well, thank you so much, sweet Eli," and just over I guess the PA system, and he just the Mannings, and particularly in Oxford, are
revered.
No doubt. Severely revered.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, we're grateful to the Magnolia Tribune. Of course, it's their event for recognizing these three fabulous Mississippians, and they'll be inducted tomorrow into the Hall of Fame. It's awesome.
I appreciate Russ Latino for continuing that tradition. Absolutely. With Magnolia Tribune and honoring these folks, and including emerging leaders, some of the younger folks. I think it's really important that you recognize those 20-somethings and 30-somethings who are
making a mark.
Who are making a mark, and I can assure you, a lot of them, if I was putting a campaign together, those are the first people I'm calling.
Yeah, it's absolutely great words, great point. Before we go here, a couple of minutes, any thoughts about the current legislative session in Mississippi? You hear the music, so we got about 30 seconds. Any thoughts?
They're fighting. I don't have big thoughts on that. I will say I don't spend a lot of time at state capitol. My partner Claire doesn't let me go down there. But she's very smart for doing that.
No doubt. Well, we got about a month left, I guess, for them to hammer out.
Yeah, about the 1st of April will be done. Yeah, so about 3 weeks left, and I can assure you they'll all be ready. Delbert, Jason White, even Tate, they'll all be delighted that it's over and behind them. And
I have to take a breather after this one.
No doubt about it.
Henry Barbour, GOP Strategist, has been our guest. Always good to see you, my friend. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Gerard.
Yep.
Thank you.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the
Bring it on! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
the great Huey Lewis and the News. Oh, man.
There's an alternate universe where it's Huey Lewis and the Lose.
Oh, maybe that's what got me subconsciously there. So
somebody flipped on the quantum computer. It just got a little squirrely for a second.
That's exactly right. So let's see. There is a question. I'm looking it up right now about HR. I didn't get this question to Henry. I apologize for that. HR 25. Amend to restore voting rights to certain qualified electors once sentencing requirements are met. Okay, that's dead, by the way. Would have required a 2/3 vote. It died in committee on February the 4th. Hopefully that's what this person was looking for.
HR 25?
That's what House Concurrent Resolution 25. That's what I'm looking at. Is that not what we're referring to? Or are they talking about a House?
HCR 25, would it not?
Well, would we be talking about House Bill 25?
Well, there's an HR 25.
Okay, I didn't see the HR. I didn't catch that. I didn't go far. Okay, I got you. I didn't go far enough down into the search machine.
And it was signed by the Speaker.
Okay, yeah, that's been adopted. This was Greg Perry, commend upon being named the 2023-24 Mississippi Athletic Administrator of the Year for classes 5A, 7A. Is that what they're talking about? Yeah. I'm sorry. I pulled up concurrent and not a resolution. That's totally different. So, Germantown High School. How about that? That's not it. Okay, says that's not it. So, what? Let us know what legislation you're talking about. That's HR 25. That's what you asked, and then we looked at House CR 25. It's dead, and then House Bill. Think we're running out, aren't we, Rhino? I think it's bills, resolutions, or current resolutions that are number 25. Just let us know what, as a House bill, teacher salaries, authorized supplement for teachers in critical shortage subject areas in D and F districts, all three of them. That's dead. Fair Tax Act. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not aware of any legislation in the state of Mississippi dealing with the fair tax, which is a national policy matter. Ben from Madison says, I'll say it, I think the Trump tariffs are misguided. Where in history has tariffs ever worked? I get the argument for using them to apply pressure on certain things, but I really think this is going to hurt our country way more than it will help. I really hope I'm wrong, but I sense the Canadians aren't going to back down anytime soon. I definitely agree with your final statement there, Ben. I don't see any sort of inclination by Canada to back down. The midterms could be brutal if everyday Americans continue to see their 401ks hemorrhaging. And I'll just report that I'm hearing privately from a lot of people who are very concerned about this. And Rhino, in particular, it's people that if you respond with, well, look, just hang in, things will recover. But honestly, when you're older and you're retired or approaching retirement, you start to get really nervous about how much time, before I see a recovery. And that's just the way stuff works. I don't see any quick fix to this, although, like I said yesterday, if just out of the blue somewhere, Canada, Mexico, China, the EU, where these tariffs are targeted, if they do acquiesce and come around and start reducing their tariffs on American goods, man, the markets will absolutely soar to the moon. I truly do believe that. So if Mr. Trump is calculating that that's going to happen and it finally does, that would be huge for the markets and the economy because it would introduce clarity and certainty and stability. I think more importantly, as Leah Long said earlier on the program with the NFIB, that getting the Trump tax cuts renewed, that is a critical issue, way more critical, in my view, than even the tariffs, because the clarity about taxes is just fundamental to prosperity, to business growth, to CapEx, to business expansion, hiring, and so forth. absolutely fundamental to it. We got crude oil back up again today as well. So, also on the ceasefire text line, I believe other countries need us way more than we need them. I think they cave before we do because the almighty dollar is what they are all after. Economy is already in the crapper on Main Street and has been for years. Paying for us now may be the only option to ensure we bring back manufacturing for our kids' future. Without our industries back, especially essentials, the future isn't bright anymore. I'm ready to endure the pain for the generations to come. I have a different take on that, and it's something that, Rhino, you and I have talked about a great deal, which is I think there's way too much emphasis put on manufacturing as a sector in the overall economy. Our economy is built around services. Manufacturing, last you and I looked at, I think it's the BLS that tracks that information, 10, 11% of total GDP. The BLS tracks contributions to GDP, composition of GDP by the various industry segments. What is it today?
9.7% of Americans work in manufacturing.
Less than 10%. Now, a lot of people may say, well, that's because we moved it all overseas. Not true, because all that happened, honestly, en masse decades ago. It's still happened somewhat in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Here's the point. And I made this before, and I think it's worth repeating. If this does induce American manufacturers, so keep in mind, when we're talking about tariffs, we're really talking about American companies who manufacture their goods in other countries in the interest of saving money, reducing costs, because especially labor is way less expensive. Rhino's pointed it out to you, $9 an hour. For the typical auto worker in Mexico.
No, it's $9 a day.
A day, pardon me. A day. You're right.
On the lower end, up to
you're right.
$35 a day.
I'm so used to talking in terms of the hour when you talk about wages, because it's hourly wages, but you're absolutely right. You corrected me. It's by the day. I mean, it's $1 and change an hour if you're working an 8-hour shift.
So is it any wonder you have migrant workers willing to work for $2 and $3 an hour?
Right. Exactly.
That's a pretty significant pay raise.
Which is a whole lot less
to them
than Americans on welfare receive. This is why I've always been a proponent of eliminating the minimum wage. I would like to see Americans work those jobs and displace all of the immigrants that come in and are willing to work for cash at $2-3 an hour. You know that's happening big time in this country because they get a buck. It was, but it's still happening to a great extent now. I mean, we hadn't completely vamoosed everybody that crossed the border, but there's been a bit of a downturn in that. Point I'm making is the next generation of factories are not going to be full of a bunch of people. So if for some reason, namely these tariffs being imposed, let's say on the auto manufacturers that make these vehicles in Canada and Mexico, first you don't just snap your fingers and multi-billion-dollar factories appear on the landscape. That takes years. That takes a while. We're way faster at constructing those facilities now due to technology and improvements in methodology, et cetera, than we ever were, no doubt. Then you got the crazy permitting processes in many of these states. That unto itself can take years. But the next generation of factories, domestically constructed, are not going to be full of people. They're going to be full of robots and machines and automation. That's good in that's how you keep the cost down. I also like it in that I'd like to see these car manufacturers and other manufacturing concerns tell these egregious unions, take a hike. We don't need you anymore. Because they've been holding American companies hostage. Now, the left will tell you it's just the opposite, that all these companies are generating profit on the backs of the hard-working American families. They'll tell you that, except in this country, as you have pointed out, we looked it up, the average hourly wage for an auto worker in this country is about $26 an hour. However, You got to layer on all the benefits on top of that. If you want an apples-to-apples comparison with a Mexican worker, I can assure you they don't get the slate of benefits that American workers do. Heck, they don't even get the vacation time that American workers do. And you have to consider that a benefit because it takes more people in the factory to cover for those who take off. I mean, vacation is an expense to a company. It's a benefit to the worker. I'm not being critical of vacations. I'm just pointing out the economic reality of it. PTO, as it's called now, paid time off. That, all the other benefits, et cetera, the employer's share of Social Security and Medicare, coming right back.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth Studios. So, Rhino and I having a robust discussion about just our economy and the manufacturing. It turns out, I know Ricky in Aberdeen, you sent us a text. I always enjoy hearing from you. What did he say here? Yeah, he said manufactured used to be a lot more. It turns out that's not the case, Ricky.
It depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, if you're looking at it from a labor perspective, you're absolutely right. Just like farming, I pointed that out earlier, where if you go back and look at the 1930s, a third of our workers were in the agricultural industry, involved in the agricultural supply chain somehow, either on the farm or in the processing or the distribution, some way, somehow. Well, that's when we had 130 million people in the country. Now we got 340 million, and it's 3% of our population. And look at the yields from the 30s to today. No comparison. We struggled feeding 130 million people in the 1930 time period. Now we produce so much, we export it. The yields off the chart, due to massive innovation in farming techniques and methodologies and supplements and fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, just down the list, everything that has contributed to efficiencies in farming. Automation, AI, all of that is involved in farming now. Well, the manufacturing sector, you're right, from a labor perspective, what'd you say, the height of that, the 70s?
Yeah, it was about 1970, 71. It was 30% of the labor workforce.
Okay.
So now that it's less than 10, it was triple 6 decades ago.
Yeah. And now, we'd have to do the math on what the total workforce is today, right, to see what 30% of that figure was versus 9% of the figure today. The point is, and by the way, from a GDP, that's where I was going. From a GDP perspective, if you look at contribution by industry segment, manufacturing has always been in that, since the 40s, 10 to 12% range of GDP. So it's been consistent. We're still, as a percent of our GDP, manufacturing to about the same extent. It still accounts for roughly the same percentage of overall GDP growth or GDP production. But man, the growth in GDP, which is $26 trillion now, what the heck was it in the 40s? $3 trillion maybe?
I found some inequality.
Okay.
We need to get the wokesters on this. They need to get their panties in a twist because only 29.1% of the manufacturing workforce is made up of women.
Oh, really?
Less than a third.
Unbelievable.
Need to get those numbers up, don't we? We're all about equality here, aren't we?
Oh, my gosh. Well, it's a good point because while you and I are talking about what I believe are meaningful figures in this discussion of economics,
They would look at that and go, that's the most important number.
That's the point.
If they wanted manufacturing jobs.
Right. Exactly.
The vast majority of the purple-haired parrots with the power bangs and the big old wing glasses don't think they really want to go into manufacturing. They want to write slam poetry for their communist commune.
Unbelievable. Well, you just described Rosa DeLauro, right? The purple-haired, big glasses, loon. Oh, my gosh. So, yeah, get this, Rhino. I just looked it up. In 1970, make sure I'm reading this right, the GDP in this country was $1 trillion. Is that what you see? Just over $1 trillion. So the GDP in this country is 26 times bigger. Man. So if manufacturing accounted for about 10% of that, wrap your head around this, because it's been pretty level in the 10% range as a amount of total GDP. Are you kidding me? That's $100 billion? That's amazing. So today, given that it still sits at about 10% of GDP, now I'm not talking about the workforce, it's $2.5 trillion. So it aligns. It's because of the 10%. It's 25 times bigger. So that's how much manufacturing has grown since its peak in terms of the workforce. That's the whole point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that we're producing 25 times more than we did 50 years ago in this country. Now, you'd have to adjust it for inflation a little bit. I get it. But with a workforce that would dwarf today's workforce in manufacturing.
You want to take a stab at what the U.S. debt was in 1970?
1970, a couple $100 billion.
$371 billion.
Missed it by 171.
We didn't hit $1 trillion in debt until 81.
Yeah, that happened under Reagan's watch. We're coming right back after Fox News and Super Talk News. Please stay with us.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays. Once again, live from the Element Wealth Studio on this Tuesday, right in the center of the week here. Well, just short of the center, I guess. Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income, growth, and guarantees. Markets continue to sell off. The Dow now down 683. Don't have any sharp objects around you. If you check your 401k plans today, you're likely not going to be pleased at the balance there. The NASDAQ, it too, is tumbled into negative territory, now down 148. Big time sell-off virtually across the board. On the C Spire text line, Jim in the Delta, how many bills has the House sent over to the Senate and the Senate let them die this year? I don't know the exact number. I guess, Rhino, we could probably run some reports in our tool to figure that out. It's both sides, but there's no doubt that some of the high-profile legislation that passes the House, I can go through the two or three main categories, meets its fate in the Senate. I think there's like a big old file 13 over there in there, Rhino, in the Senate. It's actually not in the Senate floor because it never gets to the floor. We need to place them into various committee rooms where they meet. A tragic death. What can we talk about? School choice. Virtually all the legislation, with the exception of a couple of very minor measures, it got killed in the Senate. The prospect of restoring the citizen ballot initiative process didn't even get brought up in the House when Representative Price Wallace, who chairs the Constitution Committee in the chamber, said, I don't even have the votes to get this thing anywhere, so I'm not even going to bring it up this year. So where does that put us, Rhino? Year 4 without a ballot initiative in Mississippi as prescribed by the state constitution. That, of course, due to the state Supreme Court nullifying the provision on the basis of a misalignment with congressional districts in the state and the requirements within the amendment, within the Constitution, to have an equal distribution of those who sign up for the ballot initiative, the signatures that collected that are required to get a measure on the ballot. That, of course, has to be submitted to the Secretary of State for verification and validation. So we don't have that. That's another one. Mobile sports betting. Help me out, Rhino. Did that formally get kiboshed in the Senate, or are they still thinking about it? It's I can't remember, honestly. I've kind of moved on from that when I didn't have high hopes for it. Senator David Blunt, who was on, was it last Friday with Scott Sands? Did they talk about that, Rhino, during the interview? Or was it the Friday?
Yeah, but never really got a straight answer because it's David Blunt.
Yeah.
That's all you need to say.
I think it's fair to say, though, at this point, I wouldn't expect it to come out of the Senate and to be passed in that Senate and then transmitted. It's HB 1302, and then transmitted over to.
Yeah, it died in committee.
That's what I thought. So that would be Senator Blunt's committee. Yeah, so it is not going to make its way to the governor's desk for signature. That's another major bill, I would say. And then tax reform.
I'm trying to find, there's another bill that they could potentially bring back from the dead, but I can't find it.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing right now.
It's not going anywhere in the Senate anyways.
Yeah, I mean, but you know that. That's what they're doing right now. They're scurrying around trying to figure out if there are bills. And, you know, the test there, it has to be, quote, germane. So they're trying to look for legislation that's still alive that they could perhaps insert language or perhaps even the whole bill to keep it alive and get it passed, combining with other legislation, provided it meets that germane test. So tax reform, that's the other big one, the highest profile one of all. You know about HB 1 from the House. You know about the Senate's plan. And right now, I believe there are a lot of meetings occurring behind closed doors to see if they can hammer out a deal to implement some sort of tax change legislation in the state of Mississippi. The Certificate of Need laws, that's on life support as well. That's been whittled down significantly. We're talking about the potential repeal of many of those laws to allow the free market to work in the healthcare industry. But it does look like, or I think the governor signed off, right? The direct shipment of wine. That I'm predicting, Rhino, that's going to be the biggest accomplishment of the legislative session 2025. Direct shipment of wine. I say that because I don't know if these other major issues have any chance of meaningful legislation coming about that would be enacted into law. Just doesn't feel like it at this point. So that's where we are. Also, Jim says, have you ever heard a plan from anyone on how to work on the statutory spending, or do you have one? Whatever somebody comes up with, I don't think it will be allowed to be implemented by elected officials. Well, the Democrats have been promoting plans and have legislation for a few years now. And it, of course, involves what you would expect any Democrat solution to involve, more taxes. So their plan, quite simply, is to scrap the cap, is to eliminate the $176,000 wage cap on an annual basis, subjecting such wages under that to Social Security taxes. And they want to eliminate that so that those individuals who make more than that would continue to pay into Social Security. Now, on the Medicare side, there's a cap, but then it picks up again. I believe it's after $250,000, if I'm not mistaken. But that's still not enough to shore up the program. So, yeah, the bottom line is they want to impose much higher taxes on higher income producing Americans to pay for the retirement and health care for lower income Americans, because they're not going to get any more out of it. They're not proposing to lift the cap on Social Security benefits, for example, or get some sort of special Medicare reimbursement over and above what currently exists in Medicare. It's just we want you to pay more in. Now, there have been some Republican recommendations to increase the retirement age, phase that in. That's been met with tremendous resistance from folks on the right or the left. So the bottom line, the answer to your question, Jim, is no. That's all that's ever come up. Nothing else that has any practical opportunity.
By my rough count, the Senate has killed 127 bills so far sent over by the House.
Okay. Wow. So how many have they sent? I think that's the question.
268.
Right? All right. So more than half.
About half.
Yeah. Have been kiboshed. Now, we could look at the other side as well. Also, something driving the markets, guys, is consumer sentiment is down, and retailers are issuing guidance. Earnings have actually been quite strong. I know a lot of people say, well, it's the Biden economy, and I get it. I disagreed with virtually all of Joe Biden's economic policies. But the fact is, the Biden economy was somewhat saved from a GDP perspective and a corporate profit perspective. I'm not talking about inflation, and I realize that's what most people are focused on, the rank and file. But just from a measurement of corporate profitability, it's been quite robust. And the GDP has been strong as well, and wage growth has been strong. The problem is we had to get wage growth to offset the meteoric rise in inflation in the 21-22 time period. We're just now getting beyond that, where wage growth over Biden's term exceeded inflation. And so you're above water. We were upside down for most of his term. But keep this in mind. First, he lost in the midterms, and that put the rest of his agenda on ice. If he'd have carried through with the rest of his economic agenda, that would have devastated the economy. The other thing is the Trump tax cuts were in place the entire time Biden was in the White House, and there's probably nothing that's more influential on economic performance than the tax environment. So Biden likes to brag about his economic success. Well, he needs to thank Trump and the Trump tax cuts for that. Because if would have implemented his tax plan, that would have completely crashed not only the domestic, but I would submit the global economy. Thank God that didn't happen. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Also on the C Spire text line, I didn't close the loop on the person. We don't know their name. That's fine. You don't have to do that. 601-879-4395. If you don't want to reveal your identity, that's perfectly fine. We'll still take your text.
But if you say something rude, we will assign you a nickname, and you probably won't like it.
Of that, I have no doubt, my young friend. So, the person that said, bring back manufacturing for our kids' future, I will say this. In my view, the main value of reshoring manufacturing is national security. It's not what I believe that will necessarily do to the economy and the jobs created. And somebody on the C Spire text line said, man, we can't find workers now. And I agree. We're still have relatively low unemployment in this country. And it's been low, honestly, for quite some time. Now, the Biden administration always ran around and said, we created close to 800,000 manufacturing jobs. I just got to make a declaration here. Can we quit focusing on exclusively the manufacturing industry as a metric, as a litmus test for job creation and the economy? It's 10%, and it's not going to grow. I don't care how much we bring back, and here's why. Not because manufacturing doesn't continue to grow, especially if we reshore a lot of it, because there are a lot of other industries that are going to outgrow it. As simple as that. This is actually good. This isn't bad. I'm not being critical. I'm just pointing out the reality of the dynamic aspect of the modern economy, which is primarily services. Think about all the people you know and what they do. The vast majority of them are in the services industry. Now, that would not include agriculture, and it would not include manufacturing. Those are distinct and separate. Anybody going to college? Think about that. And, boy, we talk about it all the time that we want you to get a good primary education, high school education. We've changed our attitude on this, but for the most part, they're geared for someone that seeks to go to college. Back in my day, Rhino, they call it the college-bound student is the way it was referred to. Well, I don't think anybody goes to college to go work on the assembly line. I'm not
very few.
That's great work. I'm not trying to downplay.
Well, most of the ones that go to college that then go to work in manufacturing are in a form of engineering.
That's exactly right. Or
they're not actually spending their 8-hour workday on the line. Usually, they're in a supervisory role or an oversight role for one of the engineering aspects of their manufacturing process.
Or the back office or executive team. Don't forget about that. Now, you don't have as many of those jobs as you do, the rank and file on the assembly lines. And again, I'm not trying to demean or be critical of those jobs whatsoever. Anybody that's out there working their rears off to earn a living and contributing to society has my deepest respect. I don't care who they are. I'm just pointing out that there's not like a major to go work on the assembly line in a factory. There's not one to necessarily to be a hand on a farm. Now, agriculture, farming, it's gotten extremely sophisticated. And most of those people that run those operations, they're very smart, intellectual people because it has got. Everything has, dang. But that's not where the future job growth is going to come from, is what I'm saying. And it's because technology and innovation has replaced much of that manual labor. And to your point, it's those engineers that went to college that created all that technology and innovation. And they're making 3 times as much as the person on the line that we don't need anymore because of the technology and innovation. Elon Musk says we're all going to have robots at home within 15, 20 years. His company's making them, human-like robots.
I think it'll be a little longer than that. But I
tend to agree. But that's his vision. You know, that's what he is out to do in his companies. So, and the person said the economy's already in the crapper on Main Street and has been for years. I don't think that. In what way? About the only thing you could point to, which is legitimate, don't get me wrong, is inflation. And that's rattled households, and it's caused much consternation across America, and it's largely why Joe Biden was defeated. He simply couldn't resist passing really bad legislation, the the ARPA, American Rescue Plan. That's what really, more than anything, fueled inflation, in my view. He just couldn't bear the idea that the economy was set to recover without any further action on the part of his government, and he couldn't just fathom the idea that, wait, this thing would recover without my action. They're going to give credit to my predecessor, Donald Trump. I couldn't let that happen. And so he poured fuel on the proverbial fire, and that set in motion the inflation that ravaged American households.
In fairness, the more that comes out, it doesn't really seem like he was in charge of a whole hell of a lot.
With the auto pen discovery?
The auto pen was being used prodigiously.
Agreed. I totally agree. But let's just say then his handlers are largely responsible for that extremely negative legislation. Then we got the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act. Sadly, many Republicans in the Senate, including our own Senator Roger Wicker, supported that legislation. Now there's talk, you've seen this, Rhino, among the Republicans in Congress to repeal those because all that money hadn't gone out the door yet. I would support that. Totally support that. The Inflation Reduction Act, repeal much of what's remaining there, which is nothing but, as Donald Trump likes to call it, the green new scam. He's totally right in that view. Repeal all that stuff. We don't need to spend that money. Completely agree with him on that. But Biden was running around saying, yeah, we created close to 800,000 manufacturing jobs since I took office, except he never really acknowledged the vast majority of those were just people going back to work after the government sent them home during COVID, stupidly. The real number is about 175,000. I just vote for, let's not focus on manufacturing and manufacturing jobs. Again, national security, to me, is a much bigger issue with respect to reshoring manufacturing. Did we not learn that during COVID? Hey, wow, we just figured out all the antibiotics that we use in this country are made in China. At the recommendation of McKinsey, a prominent Wall Street fortune company consulting firm, advised all those pharmaceutical companies, wow, do you know you can make this stuff in China because the labor's so much cheaper? Why don't you just move it over there? Yeah, okay, great. They did. Nobody anticipated or thought about these people want to blow us off the map. And we're handing them economic activity and economic growth and jobs, etc. So I'm all for reshoring that manufacturing, but I see it more as a national security matter than I do just boosting the economy and bragging about manufacturing jobs. That's not where the future of work is in this country. In fact, it's under pressure from all this automation that folks like Elon Musk are inventing. When will the Congress roll out the tax bill? What's holding them up? Yeah, they're working on the continuing resolution right now to keep the government funded so it doesn't shut down. They are currently crafting behind closed doors in committees based on the framework that passed a couple of weeks ago, a final budget resolution, if you will, that would include extension of the Trump tax cuts and also some spending cuts as well. And the Democrats are really having a feast day with that because they say that's going to include cuts to Medicaid. On the other hand, you've got the president who says we're not going to cut Medicaid. I actually think we are, and I think it's a good thing. I think the final bill will look like that. But it also includes a provision to increase the debt ceiling by $4 trillion over 2 years. That means that the president and at least the House anticipate producing $2 trillion deficits for the next 2 years. I don't see any end in sight on that. I think the BLS is full of BS on the ceasefire tax line. Canadian banks are cutting rates to offset tariffs. That would be the Canadian Central Bank. I haven't seen that, but I take your word for it. I will have to look that up. I mean, that could help somewhat, but only to businesses who are in need of capital and borrowing money. Importers, if they're in that boat and they need capital from financial institutions and they're incurring debt to raise such funds, yeah, that's right. It would certainly lower their costs while they bear the cost of the tariffs. We are coming right back with half an hour of middays in the Element Wealth Studio.
This program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge.
Huge news. Huge news.
Huge. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, so I have to tell on myself here, Rhino. My wife, Julie, and I used to really cut a mean rug to the Brothers Johnson. I mean, we take over the floor. I'm not even kidding. I had the stacks and the big bell bottoms and the bell sleeves.
So you're familiar with the album artwork for this single, then?
I am.
Has anybody ever figured out what kind of space laser gun he's holding there at his waist?
No.
Thing's honking.
I've always wondered, though. What I like is, of course, the two brothers. I want to say one's left-handed, one's right-handed. Am I right on that? Kind of like
I think so, yeah.
The Fab Four, right? Paul McCartney, of course, on the, what's it called? The Doppler bass, left-handed. George Harrison, right-handed. And so it's kind of neat to see them on stage next to each other because they look symmetrical, with the necks of the instruments in opposite directions. But, man, that bass player, if you go look at him, the neck on that thing was about 20 feet long, wasn't it? Well, that's a great tune. Appreciate that. So on the C Spire text line, Chad in Van Cleve says, I got twin boys. One of them went to work out of high school making $30 an hour plus triple time overtime. The other one is at Gulf Coast with a 3.8 GPA. I have no idea which is better, but they will both be okay in life. I would say, Chad, that's because you raised them right, man. The best thing they got in life was you raising them and giving them a nurturing home and a stable home environment. We can't say this and emphasize this enough, and that's why they're going to be fine in life. Kudos to you. One graduated, has got great gainful employment. The other is well on their way, excelling in the classroom. It's just so much harder when you don't have a stable home life. That is well documented. We're not just making this stuff up as red meat talking points. And I know the left will say, you're racist. No, it's just fact.
The left calls everything racist.
That's true. Following is a list of everything the Democrats do not consider to be racist. Oh, I can't think of anything. But, yeah, so, and I just want to make sure, and he says, thank you, Gerard. Of course, you're welcome, man. So I just want to say, I'm not debasing that work and avoiding college, and I think that's great. And I think a lot of people are built for that. They're wired for that. And, yes, it's not lost on me. You can make a lot of money. Heck, I got some guys in my house doing some work right now. It's unbelievable how much money I'm paying them to do that work, and happy to do so.
If you're good with your hands, not so great with books, and you're willing to work, you can make a nice living in America.
No doubt.
The problem is the left tries to convince you that you deserve that good living just for being here without putting in any work, without putting in any effort, without putting in any time. You just deserve it for existing.
I agree, and I'll take it a step further than that. They believe it's completely inequitable for the person who ran United Healthcare to make $500,000 a year, whatever heck he was making. I don't know. It was a bunch. Actually, the $500,000 that went into my head, that's because the company he ran, he made more than that, $10 million, I think, a year. But the company he ran had 500,000 employees in it. And so the way the market works is there's just fewer people who can do that. Therefore, they get paid more money. There are fewer people that can do that. They can hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, and they make way more than the CEO does. But the left never brings that up. Let the market sort it out. That's the point here, guys. The only fair determinant of wages and compensation is the market, period, not government. But they want to tell the person who is doing that sort of work, manual labor, who is enjoying, as you indicate, great wages, great compensation, great quality of life, able to take care of their family, et cetera, et cetera. They want to say, well, no, they need to make the $10 million that the CEO does. It just don't work that way. The decision, this is usually how it works, is the impact of your decisions, your work product. No doubt, to the person who's being serviced by the manual labor, yeah, that's a big deal. But it's still, at my house, it's my one house. That guy sitting in the CEO suite, he makes a decision. Not only does it affect 500,000 workers, but all the downstream effect, it's millions. So that's why they get paid more. It's just simple as that. This is a concept, Rhino, that I don't think I could ever get through to the left in this country, could I?
No.
They'd never get it.
Because they want to make $1 million to show up and be a warm body.
That's so true. So true.
They're just perpetual losers.
Mississippi Rhino still voting for CR never ends on the C Spire text line. Let's be honest here, guys. The president wholeheartedly endorsed this. Is said to have been working the phones to pull some of those reluctant Republicans in the House that didn't want to support another continuing resolution. He basically appealed to them. He said, let's get this thing done. Let's keep the government open. We don't want to shut it down and cause all kinds of headaches for people. And let us then work on getting the agenda implemented, which includes recommendations from the Doge team. It includes extending the Trump tax cuts, numerous other provisions and policies as well. That's his plan. You have to respect that. And so he's been working the phones. So just keep in mind, if there was any Mississippi members of our House on the Republican side, because Benny Thompson, of course, will not support it, but the 3 Republican reps are, and senators, he's working on them. He's appealing to them to support this. So, and of course, it's good to see, I believe, the Congress and the president working together in this respect. May disagree with the policy. Thomas in Greenwood said, I thought Congress passed ARPA. Oh, my gosh, Thomas. You completely missed the point here. I did make the point that ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, I believe was a major factor in fueling inflation. I've said that multiple times. That was an unnecessary piece of legislation that simply dropped money out of helicopters across the fruited plains. But do I have to remind you again, Thomas? Not a single Republican voted for it. I know all you want to do is trash Republicans. Let me repeat. Do I need to do it again? Not one Republican voted for this legislation. In case you weren't around then and don't remember, the Republicans did not control the House or the Senate or the White House. Same situation we have right now. Same situation. I don't know why some people just thrive on pointing that out. I really don't. But they fail to recognize.
Because they get their rocks off by being naysayers and contradictory, and it's the only way they've learned how to have a conversation. They can't just espouse their views. They have to do so antagonistically because it gets them attention.
It's unproductive, I guess is the way I would describe it. I have been critical of the Republicans, including our own Senator Wicker, and I would share this with him in person if I could on the Infrastructure Act. You've heard me say it 1,000,000 times, Rhino. When they were debating it, I was concerned.
I'll say it right here on the air. Senator Wicker, you have made some truly boneheaded decisions in your tenure in D.C. Pull your head out of your ear, man. We sent you there to be a conservative Republican.
And in my view, the 3 that were misguided votes, the omnibus bill, 23, as you recall, the CHIPS Act and the Infrastructure Act. He joined several other Republicans on the Senate side, which included Mitch McConnell. He was one of those. I think that he was really whipping some votes to get those measures through. I'm not sure why he had such a strong interest in that, the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell at the time, but he did. And that enabled those measures to pass because they had to break the 60-vote filibuster, which means you had to peel off some Republicans in doing so, and they did successfully. William and Brandon says, I'm paying $21,000 for a bathroom remodel, a bathroom. Tesla is bringing a car to the White House. Yeah, he announced this morning that the president did. He's buying a Tesla. That's because in his interview yesterday with Fox Business's Larry Kudlow, he was asked by Larry Kudlow if all this focus he's had on his Doge activities has had an impact on his businesses, and he said, yeah, it's tough, something to that effect. And so the president decided this morning, I'll help him out a little bit, the richest guy in the world. I'll go buy a Tesla. I thought that was pretty cool, honestly. I thought that was good symbolism. I really like that. Well, we appreciate you joining us today. We got another segment on the other side of the break right here. Tainted Love. That's like a quintessential 80s song as well. The Dow now down 560. Stay with us.
Tainted love, tainted love, touch me baby, tainted love, touch me baby, tainted love, tainted love, tainted love, tainted love.
At Watkins Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. So the HR 25 that our texter was referring to is the fair tax of 2025. Yeah, I mean, it comes up on a regular basis, but it's got no chance. It's just not going anywhere. I guess you could maybe take some victory laps just on the basis that you passed it. Or not passed it. You introduced it, but it's not going to pass. It's just not going to. And we don't have enough time to go down that rabbit hole today. It would be a lot. Also, Ben from Madison points out, a couple of other people's do, doesn't sound like they're going to have an answer for PERS this year either. Pretty sure the plan to create a new tier died in the House committee. It did. That was Senator Daniel Sparks's proposal to create a fifth tier, if you will, that would be a hybrid. You heard the lieutenant governor a few weeks ago on our program talk about it as well. Hybrid defined benefit, defined contribution plan, and it is thought to lessen the appeal of public sector employment in the state. Now, some people may celebrate that, but we still have to have teachers and other public sector workers to operate the state's government and provide services to its citizens for which we pay. So there's back to the drawing board on that. Yeah, the actuaries continue to warn that, okay, guys, in PERS, you need more money coming in. This thing is severely underfunded, and it's going to be a problem just waiting out there for us. Isn't that something, says Tim and McGee? The major bill to come out of the Senate was to get wine delivered to you. Good job, senators. Y'all worked harder killing bills than you've done in years. There just is a fundamental difference, if you will, in philosophy. It's more that than anything that I think is influencing the legislation.
Is it a fundamental difference in philosophy between the bodies or a fundamental difference in philosophy between the leadership?
Little of both. I believe that to a great extent in the Senate, and it's perfectly fair to attribute the failure of these various measures to the lieutenant governor, who presides over the Senate, who by far is the most powerful lawmaker in the state. That's the way our system's set up, always has been. But I think it's also fair to say, Rhino, in my numerous discussions behind the scenes with senators, that many of them feel the same way about some of this critical legislation. Now, you don't find out.
They never seem to feel confident enough to espouse those views in public in any meaningful way.
And as you know why, because the way our system works, the lieutenant governor who presides and controls the agenda in the Senate would really diminish their ability to get anything done that they find to be a higher priority. I hear you, and I agree with you. I'm simply pointing out this ain't nothing new. But we do have a fundamental, I believe, philosophical difference between the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor across a number of subject matters: school choice, taxes, mobile sports betting, what to do about PERS. What am I losing out here? Not thinking about here. Those are mobile. I said mobile sports betting. Those would be the main things, I think. A certificate of need, you'd have to say, is another one. Full practice authority. Even the PBM debate, there's lots of contention. That was a pretty high-profile issue. But that covers a lot of government right there, what we just talked about. A lot of the other stuff is kind of ancillary. I'm not dismissing its value, but it's not as sweeping, not as impactful. Elon Musk has kicked over the Democrats, says Terry in Bogachita. Hog trial, and they are mad, and they are doing to him what they're doing to him is un-American. I can't believe it. Hog trough. I'm not even familiar with that. What does that mean?
It's what they eat the slop out of.
Oh! I got you. The container itself that they feed out of. Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't reading the word right. Yeah, I agree. And what it does kind of show there, Terry, is that they seem to condone and support wasteful spending. In fact, many thrive off of it, if not profit from it. I think it's fair to say.
Well, not many directly profit from it, but yeah, their friends, their family, their wives, their girlfriends, their daughters, their sons,
they're
pretty much anybody connected to them is getting paid handsomely with money taken each and every time out of your paycheck.
And that, by the way, is exactly what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent did say when he used the term detoxify our economy. He says we're too hooked on government spending. Too many people. Haven't we not seen the gnashing of teeth and the clutching of pearls when Musk went in and ended some of these stupid grants all over the place? What am I going to do? Well, what you're doing is of no value to society. Go do something that is of societal value. We'll all be better off and wealthier for it. Simple as that. Quit wasting time and money. We are out of here today. Thanks so much for joining us. Back again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
Ford of Corinth has trucks built Ford tough with powerful engines and rugged exteriors. Whether you're hauling cargo, towing a trailer, or just need a reliable daily driver, Ford of Corinth has the truck for you, which includes a lifetime powertrain warranty. FordofCorinth.com.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.